Hello and welcome to Film Companions South. We are beginning the Ask BR series again with Vetri Maaran's Vada Chennai. Those of you who haven't seen the film to maybe step back here because there are going to be spoilers here. Jonathan Anthony asks the first question. We've seen our share of gangster flicks in Tamil cinema over the years. But even in a film as compelling as Vada Chennai, does the plot still have to get the same old get betrayed and seek revenge kind of revelations between, or is that all? See, I think it also has to do with a certain thing about Tamil cinema that unless, like let's take Scorsese's Goodfellas, right? You can show a guy who wants to be a gangster simply because he wants to be a gangster. That is, there is no moral arc involved. There is no like, you killed my dad and therefore I am forced to become this or something like that. Whereas here, with the exception of maybe the rare film like Pudupete, the hero has to be shown as somewhat of a good guy. How do you show that within the gangster milieu where you have the bad guys, right? So that becomes a bit of a problem, and I think that's why we get this whole cycle of stories, with this thing. But still, I think even within this, with Chekkachevandavanam had a slightly different take on the gangster movie where it says, I'm kind of, it's about like the three sons of a father trying to get to the number one position and, something else happening in there. So I think it's still possible, but I think it's very rare that you will find the guys being portrayed as bad, because even in Chekkachevandavanam, you have certain arcs that make us sympathize usually for those guys. They are not completely bad because, Arvind Swamy confesses in the end and things like that and all that. So I don't think it's going to be very possible to see completely deviant, stories like, let's say, Drive, because in that you have a gangster, but the story is completely about his personal emotional arc where it's about him taking care of this woman and her kid. I don't think that kind of thing is going to be possible soon in Tamil cinema, though I think that if these guys shift to Netflix kind of scenarios, a lot more variety may be possible. The next question comes from Bilwa, who says, what makes Anbar rise back suddenly into the scheme of things after 3 years? Is it the fear for his life or really cares about local people and speaks for them? See, this is one of the casualties of cutting a long film into a shorter one. What happens is the Rajan arc, that is the character played by Amir, is a template for the character played by Dhanush. So what we are doing here is by following Amir's arc, which is first he's a local guy who says no to people who want to exploit them, and then he kind of gets, gets to speak up and gets killed. We are also tracing the outline for the Anbar character, because we see a certain kind of handing over from a figurative father figure to a son happening when the binocular is handed over, or when the Rajan character teaches Anbar to play carrom. So we see a certain kind of father-son dynamic happening there. So it's basically the son taking on the mantle of a father, which is a typical masala movie staple, except that it's done in a more subdued and classy fashion here. So I think that's what we are supposed to think. That's why Anbar does what he does, even though in the movie it's not very clear, this point is not spelled out for us. That is how I convinced myself that was what is happening. Logaraj Narayanan says, most of the period films often use leader's death to remind us that the story was set in that period. Does it really help? For me, it's annoying and made me say not again. I don't know, there are many ways to do this, right? You can show, if it's the 80s, you can show Kamal Rajani films and say, okay, you're kind of, they're going to see Murata Kale or something like that, and therefore you can set the period. Or sometimes you can set the period with, Ilayaraja songs, Shankar Ganesh songs, different ways to set up the period basically. I think in this particular movie, though, it could not have been anything but the leaders dying, because at the point that MGR dies, the people talk about, the characters in the film talk about how it's next going to be a woman in power. But, when these guys talk about women rising to power, it kind of mirrors what is happening in the Vada Chennai story itself, which is that Andrea becomes the de facto leader of what used to be Rajan's gang. So it's all circular, it revolves around the power game, and it's not just a marker of politicians, it's basically something that's reflecting in this story as well. So I think in this film, it particularly fit more than some other kind of marker than just like say clothes or something like that. Srivat says, in my opinion, Rajani or Kamal would have done the Rajan character. That would have been a wonderful tribute to at least one of them, like how Kamal gave Shivaji a tribute in Tevar Magan. I don't think, first of all, Rajani or Kamal would agree to do a small but important role like that in a film by a younger hero, because that's been one of my favorite dreams to kind of see, at some point when when these actors who were once the matinee idols, at some point when they turn into elder statesmen, the way Shivaji turned into an elder statesman, and the kind of roles that they might be given, where it's not about them being the center of a movie, but being these fantastic parts that really play important, part of the proceedings. But I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So I think, it's simply, you can't convince them to do these roles. Deepak says, why is the narrative non-linear and narrated in chapters? What does it add to the story? Is it for the twist to work out? Why not in chronological order? See, I think it's mainly the one thing that the movie starts with. See, one thing is definitely that it keeps the narrative fresh, because the movie starts with a bunch of people post a murder discussing something. Right now we don't know who's this character who's been killed. We only see the killers and afterwards and what happens after that. So it's a mystery to us, and we don't even realize how important this person is till the second half of the film when that portion is actually fleshed out. So I think that's a great way to kind of lend texture to the film, because one of the key things about this Vada Chennai movie is about how the past is repeated in the present, and how these things keep kind of going in circles. And I think that's what happens in the film as well, where you kind of start in the past, jump into the present, and then kind of thing. So I think that's a very integral part of this. Could the story have been told in a linear way? Definitely, because that's just reshuffling the events. But I don't think it would have had this flavor or this guessing element of what's happening, because I think part of the things that keep us at the edge of the seat in this movie is also the fact that we are not exactly sure who's going to play what part in this movie. And if everything is clearly laid out, like the Radha Ravi character or whatever it is, then it's going to be a lot less interesting following this journey. Bilva says, does Anbu know he's being used as a pawn by Chandra or some personal vengeance? I didn't get the dynamics between Anbu and Chandra. I think the dynamics between Anbu and Chandra are basically, again, a casualty of the longer film being edited down to a smaller film. But I don't think Anbu knows that he's being used as a pawn, because at the point that he joins Samuthirakani's gang, he's still somebody who's a young boy who's just committed this murder because, not even because he had something against the guy, but because he just was tired of being teased by the village for, kissing this girl. So it's at that point that he's not some major gangster, some huge schemer or whatever it is. And when he gets refuge in Samuthirakani's gang, it's basically he has no idea that he's going to be manipulated in this way. So I don't think he knows that at all. And I think he considered Rajan an idol is a different thing altogether. It helps later when he realizes that this is what happened, because now he's able to put two and two together, figure out where Chandra is coming from, and that's his cause as well. But at the early points, no. Deepak says, I felt the main villain is Muthu, Radha Ravi. He's the reason for the quarrel between the Rajan gang, but that character wasn't impactful. What's your take on this? I think it's again, you can really keep going back, because you can say Radha Ravi is the one that started the quarrel between the gang, but then you can go back and say somebody else instigated Radha Ravi to kind of do this, and then you can go back and a little more and say somebody else instigated somebody who instigated Radha Ravi. So technically speaking, you can go, it's like a family tree. You can go sprawling back generations, or the cause and effect can go spiraling out like several times. But I think, for the purposes of this, I think it's enough that there is this politician, he's Radha Ravi, and he's doing these things. And I think we just need that sense of an external force coming into this local community and kind of manipulating things. And I think that is accomplished by the Radha Ravi character. Darshan Johan says, do you think Vetrimaran was far better writer than director here? The screenplay is smart, gripping and filled with interesting characters, but the film lacks a certain sense of style or visual aesthetic. Not many memorable shots. I don't even know where to go with this question, because I completely disagree. I think this is a spectacularly shot film. I think it's Velraj's best work, and not just because it's like the show-offy kind of work, because it so completely integrates what the story wants to say. That execution in the hotel, the way that's staged and kind of thing, it's amazing how it moves in and out of one room, goes to another, then comes back there, and then it goes all the way outside, and the framing is slightly askew. It's brilliant. I think it's wonderful. The interval block where that bit of an action scene happens with Dhanush holding up that shamiana kind of thing, that was amazing, because you kind of the darkness kind of adds to this atmosphere, because we are a bit in the dark too, and I think the cinematography is very well thought out and brilliant. And as for memorable shots, I think the shots went so well with the movie that there are so many night shots. In fact, I remember one shot which I was kind of wanting to talk about my review, but I didn't, because there's this slightly aerial shot, and you see the street lights within the ghetto or slum being lit by the roads being lit by those lights, and you see people walking along those streets like ants in an ant farm. I thought that was a brilliant way to suggest the closeness of these cramped quarters and things like that. So I think this is a really, really well shot film. I'm sorry to disagree with you. Arun Yuvaraja says, it was obvious to me the movie had too many characters. What characters do you think could have been removed or given less importance? That's the thing here. I don't think any character could have been given less importance, because I think one of the things that makes Vada Chennai is the density of the whole thing. The fact that all these people come together to kind of do these things, as opposed to there being one hero, one villain, one mother, one lover, or whatever it is. So it's like a community, and things happen in that community, and we see different people forming different it's like a carrom board, where you have all these coins and one striker, and you need all those coins in order to make the game. That's how the movie is. So I don't think it would have been possible to cut anything without losing anything, and that's why we have the slightly problematic movie that we have now, because Vetrimaran could not decide what to cut completely out, because one of the easy ways to go about cutting a big movie is to completely remove a character or like a subplot or something, and I think here it was very difficult because each person is so important in the scheme of things. Deepak asks another question. He says, do you identify Rajan as Julius Caesar and his face mark the phrase "you too Brutus" kind of assassination of Rajan? What is your view? I don't know, because Rajan with Caesar it's more like a to save the republic kind of thing, whereas here I think you could make a sense. It's a very mercenary thing that happens. It's more like based out of greed than anything else. I think the YouTube Brutus I think is definitely applicable. When I spoke to Vetrimaran for our interview, he also mentioned certain references to Macbeth and Hamlet, though these are again very fleeting. So I don't know if the actual Shakespearean depth is there in the bigger 5.5 hour or 4 hour cut or whatever, because yes, there is a witch-like character who kind of makes this prophecy when she sees Anbu, so, but then just a witch alone doesn't make Macbeth, the witch triggers a series of events that makes the person do things that, causes the tragedy. That's what Macbeth is. And Hamlet is about this young man who, loses his father. Again, that can be a parallel to Anbu and Rajan, about the ghost of Hamlet's father haunts him, and that's in a way you can say the ghost of Rajan's character kind of haunts Anbu's development. You could say that, again, these are all things that are kind of we touch upon, and I really would be interested to see how they play out in a longer cut. CK says, with reference to your review of Carter Really Dead, you consider Vada Chennai to be good cinema. I mean, right up there. Of course, because see, one of the primary things, a lot of people got confused when I said movie versus cinema. For me, a movie is something that basically you just go and you want to munch some popcorn, and you don't really care about the craft. You don't care about who's doing what, great acting, whatever it is. A director is practically invisible because it's anybody could have shot anything, but it's still at some basic level it's going on, it's enjoyable, and you're having some fun. For me, cinema is something that is the art form itself, as opposed to an individual product like the movie. So when you talk about cinema, you're talking about first and foremost the director being in charge of everything and driving everything according to a singular vision. And I think that happened very much in Vada Chennai, and I think that's one of the great things about the movie, and I think that's why it lends itself to so many multiple viewings. And I definitely want to catch like a bunch of times to kind of see, not just to get a better understanding of the characters themselves, because there are so many characters, but also to see how these little shots have been done and how that to me is cinema. Kaiser Aaron says, everybody compares Puthupetta with Vada Chennai. What is your opinion on that? Both the films carry on different genre, but some reviewers are comparing both. Yeah, I think, when you say basic gangster story, Puthupetta is like Vada Chennai, but I think Puthupetta is a completely unique movie in Tamil cinema, not only because it was one of the very first films to kind of give this very gritty North Madras gangster milieu like a burst into life like that, but also because the hero is not a hero. He's like a sewer rat. He's a bad guy. And you're talking about a guy who becomes bad, he becomes worse, he becomes worse, he becomes worse. So it's like, I had never seen anything like that because it was so powerful. And Dhanush's character, he didn't become a gangster because that was his aim. He didn't become, it was survival. It was just like this thing that inside him, this thing that said, okay, if I become a gangster, it's going to make me this this powerful guy and I can dick around with anybody. That he treats his, the women like shit. He thinks he can possess anything. Never seen anything like that. And I think that's very rare. Whereas Vada Chennai, you still have a fairly more, like a familiar arc where a guy is compelled against his like wishes to get into things that he might not have otherwise done. He's basically a good guy. He fights for his people and things like that. So I think the movies are comparable because both of them star Dhanush and both of them, but they're actually 180 degrees apart in that they're very different and unique films. So that's the end of this episode of Ask PR. We'll meet again soon. Thank you for watching Film Companion South.